two friends.
Now, Andy and I, our personalities have always been very different.
Swapping games, talking about computers, and generally making trouble.
Created an empire that crashed.
No one had ever done a platform action game in 3D.
Some of the most senior people from Sony Japan want to talk about some reservations about the character. Very, very scary meeting.
They shocked their fans when they left it all behind.
It was a really funny corporate culture. No one there knew a thing about games.
And opened a whole other world to a new generation of gamers.
We decided it would be more fun to start afresh and design a whole new franchise for the PlayStation 2.
And no problem.
We set out to create a world with very lush, realistic environment.
This is the story behind the incredible success of Naughty Dog.
Woo! I need one of those.
Jason Rubin grows up in Washington, D.C. as a pirate with a love for games.
I saw my first video game when I was about 7 years old. It was Pong. Just kind of fell in love with it. And at about 13 years old, I finally got my first computer. Just kind of took to it naturally. Started playing games on the computer, buying games on the computer, slowly hacking other people's games, trading games, buying half. Whenever I didn't have money, I would pirate. I was a bad pirate. Slowly but surely got better at hacking. Then I started putting my name on the front of it. Then after putting my name on the front of it, I started changing the games. After changing the games, I started to write my own games.
Jason hooks up with schoolmate Andy Gavin, a fellow gamer in 1982.
Jason and I met in Hebrew school class when we were 12, swapping games and talking about computers and generally making trouble.
And the two of us had very little interest in what was being taught. So we would sit in the back of class and we would talk about video games.
Next to gaming, getting into trouble becomes Jason's forte.
He knew how to make every situation interesting. We caused a lot of trouble, particularly Jason did.
Oh, I was a terror. I was an absolute terror, and I had absolutely no interest in being in class on a Sunday when all my friends were out playing.
I remember distinctly the time he was causing some trouble and he got locked in the closet.
Because I was misbehaving, and I crawled up from the closet into the ceiling, over the ceiling panels, opened one of the ceiling panels and started spitting down on my bald professor's head.
He fell through the ceiling tiles and right into the classroom, and then the whole class chased him out of there.
Yeah, I was an absolute terror, a nightmare.
By the ripe old age of 12, the friends are already plotting out their future.
All of us had Apple IIs, so we would sit around and we would kind of talk about the latest games that had come out, latest programming things we had done. The talk was very basic, but it was very useful, and it taught us a lot. Andy and I, our personalities have always been very different. Our personalities are about as diametrically opposed as any two people's personalities can be. Andy was always the quiet one, always behaved better. Andy was not like I was. But he has great stories about my misbehavior.
In 1985, Jason and Andy create an educational game called Math Jam.
Math Jam had a kind of a funny round character named Jammer, and he got happy or got sad, depending on whether you got your answers right or wrong.
But the project hits a roadblock.
We took it to the school. It was a wild success. They wanted to buy it and give it to all of the kids in the various departments of school, and they said, look, it's really easy. This is a great program. All you have to do is get 4 psychologists, 3 teacher approvals, 4 references from principals from other school districts. So that game got shelved. We kind of gave it to the school instead of trying to sell it to them.
Ironically, Jason's disciplinary problems lead to their first sports title.
The original core of the idea Jason had made up in one weekend after having gotten banned from going back to the ski slopes by his parents.
I made a game called Ski Crazed.
He handed it over to me and I did the programming.
And Andy was a better programmer than I was.
And he did the art.
It was really good looking for the time, but really slow.
I made it faster and added a lot of stuff to it. And we sold that to this little company called Vaudeville in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Ski Crazed is released in 1986 for the Apple II by Vaudeville, and the pair decides to go into business together, officially.
We started as Jam Software. Jason and Andy's Magic, which is an absolutely wretched name.
At that time, kind of the early mid-'80s, you know, jams were really in, like those pants out thing, and we kind of like that look, so it was a cool name, and then it had like J.A., Jason and Andy.
We had this vision, even back in 1987 when we changed the name to Naughty Dog. And we wanted a name that would stand out, that someday people would pick up a box and they'd say, oh, Naughty Dog. Well, I know that company. That's a good company.
Jason and Andy graduate from high school and head off to different colleges.
I was in Michigan and Andy was in Philadelphia at Haverford.
The programmer and artist are separated, and despite the distance, they continue to make games like Dream Zone.
That was an adventure game where you went into your own head and you got stuck in your dreams and you had to escape. It was a sort of limited, small-scale success, but it encouraged us to move further, and we thought that it could have gone farther if our publisher had done a little more with it. So we called up Electronic Arts and said, hey, can we make a game for you? And they were like, sure. How's $15,000 and 10%? We were like, cool. And so that's how Keith the Thief got started.
Andy and Jason sign with EA. And in 1989, Keith the Thief is released, followed by Rings of Power 2 years later for the Sega Genesis.
At least 2 of our games we did while we were at college. After that, I moved out to Newport Beach to learn to surf, left the gaming industry for a year, started in the special effects industry. Andy went to MIT to get a degree in artificial intelligence, computer science. It was all working out for both of us, but the 3DO came out, and an old friend of ours, Trip Hawkins, who was starting the 3DO, called us.
In 1992, Jason packs his bags and moves to Massachusetts to join Andy. They work on a 3DO title, Way of the Warrior.
Andy and I finished Way of the Warrior for the 3DO and signed a contract to publish it with Universal Interactive Studios.
With Universal Interactive's deep pockets behind them, Jason and Andy finally have the money, staff, and confidence to move ahead.
It was like, come join the Hollywood synergy. We'll put you up on the back lot.
Part of that contract involved a housing deal that put us on Universal's back lot.
Which seemed really cool at the time.
And gave us finances, basically, to start a company.
By 1994, Jason and Andy decide to make the move out west, but they will soon crash. By 1994, 24-year-olds Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin have gone from 2 kids hacking in their basement to a lucrative deal with Universal, and one of their most famous games is born on a road trip.
On our way across country from Boston to Los Angeles, I think it was Iowa, that we decided that we wanted to make a character action game. And by the time we left Iowa, we had decided that we wanted to do it in fully 3D. What we did is we said, how do you move a 2D game into 3D?
What would it be like if you put Sonic the Hedgehog in 3D?
And what we realized was that the simplest conceptual way to do this was to take a 2D world that was flat to you and simply rotate it like this, so that the gameplay happened without movement to the left and right, but rather in and out. This concept we called Sonic's ass.
You'd have a game where you're always watching Sonic's ass. Yeah, because the camera would be behind him. So we jokingly called it the Sonic's ass game.
Jason and Andy strive for a different look, great graphics, and a true 3D environment.
Let's kind of take a Warner Brothers style cartoon and put it in 3D. We came up with the idea of putting the camera on kind of dolly, like they do in a lot of movie scenes. Therefore, you kind of knew where the camera was going to be and had a decent vantage point on the actions.
The advantage to our method was, by turning the camera 90 degrees and keeping the character restricted, we could draw a lot more polygons. And the look, the density of the foliage, the amount of detail in it, gave it a competitive edge.
Jason and Andy received the okay from Mark Cerny, president of Universal Interactive.
Well, one of the big challenges of console development is that when it's shipped. You cannot send a patch for a PlayStation game. So all the polish that we want to get in there has to be done at Gold Master time.
But Andy and Jason's relationship with Universal has some glitches.
We kind of knew we wanted to do an animal character.
We dealt with a marketing department at Universal that had some very interesting ideas about where they wanted the character to go. Some of the names that they stuck on and actually printed up materials: Wezzles the Wombat, Willie the Wombat, Wuzzy. I can tell you, any gamer in the United States that picked up a box with Wuzzy the Wombat and the corresponding goofy attitude character that would have come from that, it would have been an absolute disaster.
But the pair has different ideas for their character.
We went through books of different animals and stuff, and we came across the Bandicoot, and he was cute and he had a cool name.
So Crash the Bandicoot is born. And the game is a truly ambitious undertaking.
At the time, no one had ever done a platform action game in 3D and had never done a game with a true free-roaming camera. The only kind of games that were 3D were simulator games and Virtual Fighter, and all those had constrained cameras.
We were trying to do something that ended up being almost as complex as what we're now doing with 10 programmer staff on Crash Bandicoot. We had an extremely complex algorithm to compress the levels so that we could run 12 to 15 megabytes of data through the 2 meg PlayStation.
I think I counted about 12 all-nighters that I had. That means that you come in at 10 o'clock, you don't leave till the next day at 8 p.m. or so. It was very chaotic and hectic, but we all knew that this was something very big.
In the spring of 1995, Sony unveils the PlayStation. And in 1996, Crash Bandicoot is unveiled at E3.
Crash Bandicoot was seen by everybody. And right then and there, it was out in the face of everybody saying, yeah, we know Mario. Mario's the king of the industry. But here's Crash, and he's out there to compete head-on with Mario.
And in the fall of 1996, Crash Bandicoot is released to the public.
Nintendo has Mario. Sega has Sonic. We're going to make the mascot for Sony. Now, Sony never needed, never wanted, and never created a mascot for the PlayStation. But it was the defining character action game for the PlayStation.
By December of 1996, sales have soared. But for the Japanese release, some changes are in order.
When we signed our publishing deal with Sony Computer Entertainment, Sony said, this game is not just an American game. This game has to do well all over the world. And to be honest with you guys, Japan has some reservations about the character Crash Bandicoot. Some of the most senior people from Sony Japan are coming to America, and they want to talk to you about the character because the character was designed by Americans for the West. It was not designed in any way with Japan in mind. Very, very scary meeting.
So back to the drawing board it is to give Crash a little makeover.
So we took a break for 15 minutes, and I went to one of our artists, Charlotte France, and I said, Charlotte, close his mouth. Get him a smile, but get rid of all teeth. And Charlotte worked frantically for 15 minutes, got rid of it. We printed out that image. I walked in, and they said, that's Crash Bandicoot. They worked their entire marketing plan around creating an image for Japan that worked.
With tweaks to Crash's appearance in place, in December 1996, Crash is released in Japan. Crash Bandicoot becomes the first U.S. title to sell over 1 million units, and Crash Mania hits Japan, even inspiring a dance.
Shaki, shaki, shaki. Shake, shake, shake. Go, go dance. Ah, 半回転.
His sort of weird, characteristic dance, which was actually kind of made up by the Japanese marketing department for their commercials and stuff. And it was just so goofy that it kind of worked.
Crash Bandicoot the sequel is released in 1997, and by January 98, sales of both Crash 1 and 2 reached 5 million units worldwide. Crash Warp sells over 1 million units following its 1998 debut. The Bandicoot becomes a legend, and in 1999, Crash resurfaces on a kart racer.
The first 3 games in the Crash Bandicoot franchise were traditional character action platformers. We wanted to expand our horizons and do something a little bit different, fully 3D rather than a linear path, and we were really excited about trying to bring the excitement of a kart racer to the PlayStation.
Crash Team Racing sells 1 million units. By 1999, the Crash franchise has generated more than $300 million. Not bad for a couple of kids from DC. Naughty Dog is eager to streamline their operations.
The beginning of Universal's relationship with Naughty Dog was Universal is a powerhouse in Hollywood. That was the spirit with which we joined Universal.
Management began to change at Universal, and they ended up in this odd middleman position where they had sold the rights of publishing to Sony, and Sony was doing the publishing, and we were doing the developing, and they were kind of there in the middle. With the exception of Mark, no one there knew a thing about games.
As we kept moving forward, we realized, Mark realized as well, that the best way to create games was to do the production at Naughty Dog and the publishing at Sony, and that Universal was not adding to the mix.
So we just kind of outgrew them.
Naughty Dog severs ties with Universal and Crash, the little guy that helped launch them.
I thank my lucky stars that we made the decision, hard as it was, to walk away from an absolute superstar and start something new.
But for Naughty Dog, that something new they're about to introduce will take them even further. By 2000, having left the Crash Bandicoot franchise behind, Sony approaches Naughty Dog for a buyout. In a deal worth millions, Naughty Dog becomes a subsidiary of Sony Computer Entertainment.
It just really made sense for us to concentrate on the development aspect, to not have to worry about picking the best publisher and whether we got the best deal.
But working with Sony has been absolutely fabulous, and I still believe that they are one of the best publishers on the planet to work with.
And two new characters are let loose in the video game world.
So we decided it would be more fun and more productive to start afresh and design a whole new franchise for the PlayStation 2 with this generation in mind.
The result is Jak and Daxter, the precursor legacy, released in 2001.
Jak's the hero. In Jak 1, he was the strong silent type. He had no voice. We wanted to let the player sort of take on the role of Jak. And then Daxter was along to provide the comic relief and the banter.
Oh, I get it. Like a sidekick.
What we wanted to create with Jak and Daxter was a world that felt like a single contiguous giant playground that you could go around and do everything.
At the heart of the game is a powerful new engine.
We spent a tremendous amount of time building the technology of this engine to make these big worlds and move huge amounts of details.
What we wanted to do was create an immersive world that the player entered and felt a part of, and to see how areas connected and related to each other with some very grand, long views and vistas.
I am very proud of Jak and Daxter. I think it was a benchmark game. Still, people are basing their reviews of other character action games around Jak and Daxter.
Jak and Daxter was also a really big step in our industry.
We got the moves, eh, Jak?
It was the first, I think, successful platformer out on the PlayStation 2. They came out of the doors before anybody else did with this sprawling platformer that showed off technology that nobody else could match.
Naughty Dog shares the technology to their exclusive engine with fellow Sony developer Insomniac Games.
We licensed this core graphics part of the Jak and Daxter engine to Insomniac Games, which they used in Ratchet & Clank.
They've given us technology back.
Because we've been really close with Insomniac for years. They were actually next to us at Universal.
We really do respect Naughty Dog's technical expertise, their design skills, their artistic approach. They make beautiful games.
Watch when you walk.
Meanwhile, Jak 2 is in development for release in fall of 2003. And this time, Jak is all grown up. Well, sort of.
In Jak 2, Jak is angry. He's out for revenge. He's had some experiments done on him in prison. He's been in prison 2 years. He's older. He speaks.
Something's happening to me.
He's not a terribly happy guy. It's a darker world in Jak 2. Daxter, on the other hand, is the same nutcase.
Why don't I like the sound of that?
This version's gonna be rated teen. You're gonna be carrying big guns. Jak's not this innocent little boy anymore. He's upset, he's angry.
Jak 2 is a huge undertaking with more levels, more weapons, and more characters.
Jak 2 is the most unbelievably enormous game.
We revamped the engine that we used in Jak and Daxter. In fact, we're calling it the Naughty Dog Engine 2.0. We added all kinds of new effects to our engine, the ability to do distortions and glows, just making the game look so much more rich and realistic.
The amount of stuff in the game. Every mission is different, and you can do a lot in multiple ways, and Jak has really powered up.
I am more excited about Jak 2 than I've been about a game in a long time, since Crash 1. I think Jak 2 does things for the industry and does things for character action games that haven't been done before.
The success of Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter franchises has elevated the duo to celebrity status in the game world and beyond.
I ended up Cosmo's Bachelor of the Month. And I got calls or emails from every one of my friends in high school, all of my friends in college, fraternity brothers. Anybody that knew me somehow saw this Cosmo article. 2,500 emails, a few proposals for marriage, a lot of nude photos, and I got spotted a few times right after that in clubs.
We jokingly, call this Jason's trying to be shallow phase.
People would come up and go, I know, you're the Bachelor of the Month. Oh my God.
And for the unlikely team of the troublemaker and the quiet one, their friendship has never been stronger. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Naughty Dog has built a solid reputation in the game industry.
Andy and Jason were kind of the band of brothers, the best friends that are, trying to make it in the gaming world, and they finally made it. Now their team size went from 2 to 3 people to 30 to 40 people.
Working with Andy has been an absolute pleasure, and I really don't believe I could have achieved what Naughty Dog's achieved without him. Andy's a programmer, I'm an artist. We have different ways of looking at the world. I look at things visually and how they impact people. Andy looks at the underlying things that are going on behind it when he's creating it.
It's like a brother relationship. You take a certain amount for granted, but you have all this common experience and you can totally trust the person. Every one of our games is part of this obsessive quest for trying to make the more ultimate game.
And it's been a great ride, and I'm very, very happy and proud to be a video game creator.
それでは頑張りましょう。
That's what I call blowing someone's mind.